I'm going to tell you who I think are the most important players on the Badgers roster this year.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Really do appreciate every single person, whether you're listening in the car, watching it somewhere, at work, doing yard work, whatever it is. Thank you so much. Today's episode brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach, brand new mobile game that lets you be the coach of a team, completely free, no ads, 100% playable online. Offline, use the promo code LOCKEDON CFB, all caps, inside the game store. Receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Okay, I was trying to think about this the other day. And first of all, I want to start with, it's game week. Welcome to game week. Congratulations to everybody who survived the summer drought of college football. We are almost here. We are excited. Take a breath, because it's about to get down. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to be here with all of you for this. We are here. It's game week. Let's go. And then based on just some recent, listen, the James Thompson news is out there. We don't know how long he's out, and I don't want to speculate too much till we hear more, so I'm not going to. But it got me thinking, who, not the best, but who are the most important players on the roster this year? Like the guys that if something were to happen to them, yikes city, right? I'm going to rank the top 12. Who are the top 12, in my opinion, most important players on the Badgers roster this year? We're going to start at number 12. I'm going to tell you why I think each one is so important. Tucker Ashcraft. Now, again, this is not the ranking. I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying Tucker Ashcraft, I think, is the 12th best player on this team. What I am saying is he's the only tight end on the roster right now that I think gives you a little bit of both. I think he can catch the ball. I think he can get out in the route tree a little bit. Third down, right? 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. I think he can be kind of a safety option there. He's got pretty good hands. Remember, he was a true freshman last year, and he played okay for a true freshman. In fact, for a true freshman, he played pretty good. So what's he going to look like? Now he has a full year in college football. But again, you look at that tight end room, he's the guy that you can put in on first down and you can trust him to block a little. He's the guy you can put in on third down and you can trust him to catch a little. I think everybody else in that tight end room is a little limited. I think they're maybe a little one trick. I don't want to say it, but like, listen, Jackson McGowan, he's not the blocker Ashcraft is. He can give you something in the passing game for sure. He's a better athlete. Rob Booker and Grant Steck. I think Grant Steck eventually is the do everything tight end on this roster. I love him. He's not there right now. Rob Booker has the athletic tools. He's not there right now. You start to look at this. Seagreaves JT Seagreaves hasn't really come through. Ashcraft is the one guy I think you can use at the tight end spot if Phil Longo wants to employ one, any down and distance. I think you can, and they did this some last year with Mordecai. They used him as kind of a personal protector in the backfield. You can use him in pass block, run block, some outlet throws. I just think he's a little irreplaceable with his skill set right now on the roster. So, and I'm excited to see what he does in year 2. I think there's growth there. I think there's absolute growth there for Tucker Ashcraft. So I got him at number 12. Number 11, I have Jake Chaney. And it's hard sometimes to parse the player versus the position versus the depth. What is most important? That's kind of a loaded room. Inside linebackers got a ton of depth, right? Jaheim, Jancy, Allegro, Tackett, Chaney. There's 5 or 6 bodies in there that you can roll with and be like, okay, we're all right there. But I just don't know if any of them brings the leadership that Chaney does. Like, he is just a demonstrated guy in that locker room. I think he's a culture builder. I think he's a bit of a modifier, right? Like, I think everybody gets a little better when he's out there. And I also believe that he's going to have a monster year. So yeah, from a depth standpoint, you can replace a loss at inside linebacker. I don't know if you're replacing the leadership that a guy like Chaney brings. I don't know if you're replacing some of the instincts, some of it gets a little hyperbole at times, but some of the coach on the field stuff. He's a coach's kid. He understands football. When you hear him talk, he gets it. I think there's an intangible benefit to having Chaney on the roster. And I would point out again, I've said this all year. You have brought all these guys in, and what have the coaches consistently said? Yeah, Chaney's one of those guys. He's one of the top guys. It didn't matter who they brought in. They could have brought in Urlacher, and Chaney would be in that top group. I mean, maybe that's a little hyperbole at this point, but I don't think you replace him from a leadership standpoint and just from an on-the-field play standpoint. I think he's going to have a tremendous year. So Chaney, I got at 11. I think from a pure talent standpoint, he'd be higher. But again, the depth at inside linebacker, you do have some margin there if something were to happen. Number 10, I have Barten. Like, you just can't lose another defensive lineman. And again, this goes back to the whole point of the exercise. I don't think he's the 10th best player on the team, but I think he's a solid, dependable guy on that defensive line that is going to give you, like, he's going to be able to play against the run. He's got some of what James Thompson had, right? He's got size, he's got veteran ability, or a veteran status, right? Which means he's been through the rigors. He knows what to expect. No, the moment's never going to be too big for him. He's got some of the wingspan, right, that we like with Thompson, where he can affect the passing game. He can get offensive tackles off him a little bit. He can be stout against the run. And we're just so low on bodies on the defensive line that I think I had to put Barten in my top 9. It's not the last defensive lineman you're going to find on this list, because there's just very few people now you can lose in that group and still continue to feel good about that front 7. So I have Barten at 10, and then at 9, I have Will Pauling. Again, Will Pauling is a better player than number 9 on this team, but I just really like the depth at receiver. Right? If you were to theoretically lose a guy like that, I think Tretch could step into the slot role. I thought Kyan Barry-Johnson as a freshman, he showed some really interesting things, got some rest with the twos. I think you could probably put him in some of those roles and be okay. I like that they have 3 or 4 options on the outside. I think you could do some receiving stuff, interesting stuff with Dupree if you had to out of the backfield. Pauling's a stud. Pauling is one of the best 2 or 3, probably best players on this entire football team. He is an absolute stud from the slot spot. But there's a lot more depth there. There's just a lot more options there, in my opinion. Now, stars matter, and I think you could definitely make the argument he should be higher on this list because even though there's depth there, you're not replacing a Pauling. And again, this is just my list. Feel free to disagree. I'd love to see the comments what y'all think. Who are the most important players on this team? I have Pauling at 9 just because I think the depth is better. So my 9 through 12, I have Pauling, who's an absolute stud, one of the top 5 players on this team. I just like our depth there if something were to happen. I got Barten at 10. Defensive line, defensive line, defensive line. You talk to Brian Smith, you talk to me, you talk to anybody. They need more bodies there. Jake Chaney at 11, really from a leadership standpoint, I don't think you're replacing that guy. And then I got Tucker Ashcraft at 12. Again, it's a depth thing. There's not a lot of bodies in that tight end room that you feel okay saying go compete at the line of scrimmage and then go catch a pass on 3rd and 6. I think Tucker Ashcraft can do both of those things. So that's my 9 through 12. Coming up, we're going to get my next grouping, most important players on the Badgers football team this year, the guys they cannot afford to lose. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But a quick break for our friends of the show. A quick second to say thank you again to everybody tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. If you want to put yourself in the big seat, the hot seat, this is how to do it. It is 100% free, ad-free. You can play it offline. It's a college football simulation. You be the head coach, and you can set the strategy. That's what I love about it, right? Whatever you want to call. Again, if you want to be Paul Christ, go back to that ground and pound, run the ball. If you want to be Gary Anderson and find a Tanner McAvoy to run your offense, you can do all of that with this amazing game. We love it. Plus, if you use code LOCKEDONCFB, you're going to get 100% free boost, kind of push your program a little bit further, get your coaching legacy off the ground. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is absolutely awesome. Download the app. Download it from the app stores. Visit ultimatetachcfb.com. That's ultimatetachcfb.com. Use the code LOCKEDONCFB to get started and begin your dynasty today. I love it. You're going to love it. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Also a great time to go check out our Locked On College podcast. Spencer McLaughlin's got you covered all year long, everything you need as football gets going. Check that out at Locked On College Football. All right, let's get back into our show here and keep talking about the next group I have. Right, so again, we're ranking the 12 most important players, in my opinion, on this roster. Number 8, I got Joe Huber. Again, a big emphasis on this is going to be depth. Where do we have depth? Where do we don't have depth? Huber, I think Huber is probably my award for. I need to come up with a name for some of these awards I'm thinking of. He's like my construction worker award. Working on the name. But he's the guy that you pass going to work, and he's out there building the roads. He's laying the culverts. Like, he's putting asphalt down. He's cutting down a tree. He's working on the line. That's Joe Huber to me. Irreplaceable, but a little forgettable, unfortunately. And he's a guy who, what I mean by that is he doesn't get enough attention. He really doesn't. And I talked about this in a previous show. I think he's a potential NFL guy. Like, I really think teams could look at him because the NFL roster crunch is such that you need versatility in one-year backup lineman. You need a guy who can play left guard, right guard, maybe come in at tackle if in a pinch if you need it. Huber can play everywhere, and he's a veteran. He's functionally strong. tons of experience. His coaching staff really likes him. He's going to start this year. He's an irreplaceable piece to this line because not only is he in that starting group, but he's the guy. If chaos happens, he's the guy you can plug him and into a bunch of spots to kind of help fill holes, right? If your dam is starting to leak, you can take your Joe Huber bubblegum and plug it into that hole and say, all right, that hole's fixed. Now we can worry about something else. That's irreplaceable. That's absolutely irreplaceable, that level of versatility and experience on an offensive line in general, but even more so when you have so little of it in the trenches. Huber is vitally important this year. I got him at number 8. Again, coming down to the depth, but again, also the talent. I think he's a more talented player than people give him credit for, and coupled with his depth, incredibly important. Number 6 and 7, I'm going to talk about both of them because I think they're intertwined. 7, I have Jack Nelson. 6, I have Riley Mallman. I don't know how you separate them, but they're both incredibly important. Again, we talk about it all the time. It's going to be a theme on this show, right? It's depth in the trenches. That's going to make or break this year. As much as Tyler Van Dyke, as much as the pass rush, as much as some of the young players being able to step up, as much as special teams being better, right? The trenches and our ability to hold up over what we know is going to be a physical season. Just look at the schedule. Who on this schedule do you term a physical team? Alabama? Yeah, that's a 5-star. Let's just do it by recruiting rankings. Alabama's a 5-star physical team. They're gonna beat on people. Okay, that's a really physical game. Iowa, physical game. Nebraska is going to be a physical game with Matt Rule and the way he's rebuilt the trenches. He's got veterans in the defensive line. That's a physical game. Let's see what else. Oh, Oregon. Oregon's going to be a very physical game. They've done a really good job over the last several years developing offensive linemen, putting them into the NFL. He's got 8 or 9 blue chip defensive linemen. They've recruited incredibly well there. That might be the deepest spot in the Big Ten, Oregon's defensive line. So those are all physical games. Let's see what else. Penn State's going to be a physical game. Absolutely. Even if their offensive line, I don't think it's quite as bad as some Badger fans seem to think it is. I don't think it's great, but they got dudes. They got recruiting dudes. But the defensive line, the defensive front 7 for Penn State's always good. And if we're talking about offensive line depth, that's who they're blocking. So that you're looking at this schedule, there's 5-6 physical games this offensive line and defensive line are going to have to power through, which means depth is incredibly important, which makes the health of guys like Nelson, Mallman, Huber insanely important. So that's my 6 and 7, Mallman and Nelson. I think you can flip-flop them either way. I have Nelson a little higher because I actually kind of think Nelson's the better player. Mallman a little higher because I think he's been a little more consistent. I think he's a little bigger, probably a little bit stronger, longer reach. And he's already a player we've seen tweaked a little bit, right? We've seen him miss some time in practice, which leads to a guy like Kevin Haywood getting reps, which is great for Kevin Haywood, but that's kind of terrifying for this year. I think long-term, Haywood's going to be a star. We talked about, he's like Bigfoot out there. I mean, you don't see guys like this in the wild very often, right? People with his size, frame, and mobility skills, but not this year. Like, I don't want to see him as much this year unless we're mopping up Iowa in the fourth quarter. We're up 28-3. Now it's Kevin Haywood time. Let's get some reps in Kinnick. So Nelson and Mallman, incredibly important. And number 5, I have Curtis Neal. Again, talking depth on the lines, right? Who can you not afford to lose? And you had Thompson and Neal, your kind of 2 veteran returning guys penciled in there, along with Barten, along with some other pieces coming in, obviously Cade McDonald, Elijah Hills, Brandon Lane. Hopefully you get something from Jamel Howard. But Kurt Neal is poised for what I think is a pretty good year. He's a player. If you remember back to the Curtis Neal recruitment, this was a guy who was Alabama, Iowa, some really good programs. Some other SEC programs were kicking the tires on him. And then he had that knee injury in high school, missed basically a year, and some of those schools backed off. But he's that type of guy where he could be a disruptive defensive lineman. Really the type of player we haven't had a lot of, right? That defensive lineman, defensive tackle, that inside presence that can get some disruption, that can get, because he has a low center of gravity. He's got a pretty good get off. He's strong. He can kind of shoot some gaps and create some havoc. You need him healthy now. Like, you have to, this has to be a big Curtis Neal year, and not big in terms of stats, but big in terms of impact. And more importantly, big in terms of consistency and big in terms of reps. Like, if you get consistency and reps from Curtis Neal and you get it over the course of this year, I think it's going to be huge for this defense. And I think they need it, right? So let's just recap this list. I have Curtis Neal at 5, Riley Mallman at 6, Jack Nelson at 7, and Joe Huber at 8. So defensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Yeah, you can see where my concern is. And again, Let me know in the comments who you think your 12 most important guys are, your 5 most important guys. You don't need to be an overachiever like me and do the 12 most. Give me your 5 most important guys this year, the people we can't lose. I have a heavy emphasis on the trenches for obvious reasons, because we've already seen some attrition there. We've already seen some minor attrition there, and the depth just isn't there. Before we get into the top 4, who I think are the top 4 important players on the team this year, let's focus a little bit on how do they fix this. So is the light at the end of the tunnel, right? We've talked all off season, defensive line, offensive line depth, defensive line, offensive line depth. The light is at least on the offensive side. I don't think next year, but the light is at the end of the tunnel. We are approaching that. They got 5 really strong freshman offensive linemen from last year's class. They coupled it up with a really good group this year's class, 10 guys in the last 2 years. However, you look at next year, I think so that 10 group of freshmen, all of which won't hit, obviously, because that's how recruiting works. But they're going to start paying benefits really in a couple years. Outside of guys like Mandel, maybe Coverly, Haywood, it's hard for a freshman and redshirt freshman to play right away. You're looking at next year, you're going to lose a Renfro, a Huber, a Hallman, a Nelson. You have a lot of bodies going out the door next year. You're going to need, so next year could be the numbers are better, but there's a lot of kind of learning curve, inconsistency. I do love the fact that Blazek is a really good coach. I think Brady Collins is going to get him ready. I think that accelerates the growing curve right there. It lessens it. But next year's still going to be, I think, a little wobbly because you're going to be working in a ton of newer, more inexperienced pieces. Now, I think you're going to pencil Haywood into one of those tackle spots. Ideally, you probably pencil in Leighton Nelson, maybe the Vanderbilt transfer who's coming in. Maybe he's becomes kind of a Joe Huber with versatility, can play everywhere. But you're going to have to hit the portal again, I think, next year to find a body or two. Ideally, maybe a center who can step in and play. But the light is at the end of the tunnel there. Defense line, they just got to get more bodies. I mean, I think they need a couple classes. I like the class this year. I think Torrin Petaway could have huge upside. I like Clayton coming off the edge, Telemock. Like, I like the class this year. I think this is what you need to do. This is a really solid, good class. They need to stack it up again next year and probably get a one more of those star type guys, like a Wohler plus 3 bodies. They got to start getting 4 to 5 bodies a year until they build those numbers back up. And that's my opinion. And you saw some of that emphasis this year, 2 transfer defense alignment, but you remember how hard it was to get those guys. So I don't know if the light is fully at the end of the tunnel on the defensive line yet. They have to get 4 or 5 guys for a couple years to really rebuild those numbers. And they inherited those numbers, but at this point, it's now on them to rebuild that depth. I do see the light at the end of the tunnel on the offensive line for sure. It's coming. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to get to our top 4, what I think are the 4 most important players on the Badgers roster this year. Plus, is Phil Longo catching some strays from Badger fans, warranted or not? We're going to get into that next on Locked On Badgers. But a quick break for our new friends of the show, new sponsors of the show, 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the Locked On Family 5 Hour. Listen, I use this sometimes when I have an immense DIY list, right? Like I'm trying to tackle stairs and attic. I'm redoing my office. That's why I'm still recording in the basement. I got to make a new one. I use 5 Hour Energy to help tackle all of that kind of to-do list so I don't get too tired. I can power through it. I can still talk Badgers when I'm done. That's what 5 Hour Energy does for me. 0 sugar, which is always incredibly important because so many of those energy drinks are caked with it. It's insane. Convenient, portable size, perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore. You like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry. There's a flavor for everybody. They got the cornucopia flavors. Try them all on the site. You can even have the option to build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors delivered right to your door. If you go to 5 Hour Energy, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. Get some 5 Hour Energy products today. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB, and you're going to get 20% off your order. That's saving cold, hard cash. The offer is only valid till September 30th, and you cannot use it with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, let's get into our top 4. Again, we've been going top 12 most important players on the Badgers roster this year. Number 4, I got Ricardo Hallman. That dude, 7 picks last year, cornerback number 1. I do like the depth at corner, but it's a little unproven, right? You have Xavier Lucas, you have DeCluna, you have Max Lofi in the slot. Jace Arnold is somewhere out there. RJ Delancey, who I really think had a pretty solid fall practice set, but he's a star. And sometimes you just can't replace stars, right? So I think Rico as the anchor of that defense, the veteran cornerback you can count on, he's cornerback one. There's just not many of those guys. I don't think he's a true shutdown corner. Like, I don't think he's a true, we just leave this guy on an island against whomever. He shadows him. He falls around the field. He's not Sauce Gardner because physically he doesn't have those tools, but he's really, really, really good. And Pro Football Focus, the advanced metrics back it up. The eye test backs it up. 7 interceptions, a little fluky. Like, some of that is luck, but you also don't fully luck your way into 7 picks, if you know what I mean, right? Like, he anticipates, he knows coverages, he watches film, he has great short area quickness, incredible hands, he's a playmaker, really good anticipation. Got to get a little better tackler. He's got to get a little more physical, and I think he knows that. But ultimately, tackling is 1B for cornerback, right? If you are a really good cover guy, you can live with some missed tackles here and there. And it's not ideal. I think you'll be a little better there. But yeah, I got Rico at 4 because he's a star. He's a star cornerback in an era of football where it's all about protecting the quarterback, finding the quarterback, covering the guys, hitting the quarterback. It's all about the passing game. So if you can affect the passing game, you are vitally important. And there's no replacement for Rico if he goes down, right? There's depth, but there's not a Rico replacement. You would have to start scheming more things. I think Rico allows you to do a ton of things, right? If the defense line is struggling at the point of attack against Alabama, having a guy like Rico maybe allows you to be a little more aggressive with your safeties in the box, to bring another guy in down there because you trust Rico to at least hold up on an island. Maybe not the entire game, but you feel pretty good about it. So Rico, I got at number 4. Number 3, I got Hunter Wohler. Again, stars. I don't mind the depth at safety at all. In fact, it's pretty good, right? Behind him, you got Latu, you got Moore, you got Austin Brown, you got Preston Zachman. That's 4 bodies that aren't bad. But there's, much like Rico, there's no replacing a Hunter Wohler. I just think he means so much to the defense, his ability to play coverage, be in the box, be a dependable tackler, and a defense last year that was often missing it. I think you're going to see an even better Hunter Wohler this year. We saw a couple picks from him in practice. He's maybe the best player on the team, period, stop. It could be Pauling. Maybe it's Rico. Maybe it's, I don't even know who else you would put in that discussion. And you cannot replace stars. This is an NFL defensive back with experience who's added 20 pounds of muscle, who is ready for a big time year, in-state kid, understands what it's like, what it means to play for the W. Irreplaceable. Much like Chaney, you can't replace his leadership. You can't replace the intangibles he brings. And then from a physical standpoint, he's still elite. So I've got Wohler at 3. Number 2, I have Tyler Van Dyke. He's a quarterback. Like, you can argue that he shouldn't be this high because Braden Locke looked better because there's a serviceable backup, but ultimately he's the quarterback, and he's a quarterback that I thought looked decently better than Braden Locke, in at least what I saw. I think he's a quarterback that gives you more upside because of his arm strength. He's going to help you win the tougher games, whereas I'm not sure if Braden Locke can do that this year. So yeah, to me, he's number 2 because the season, it's going to essentially, as long as we don't have crazy injury stuff on the lines, as long as we don't have really bad luck, much of the season is going to depend on how good this offense is, how tight this passing game is, and a lot of that is firmly on the shoulders of Tyler Van Dyke, namely that right shoulder of Tyler Van Dyke. So I am at number 2 because I just, ultimately touches the ball every time. There are questions there. And I think this offense is poised to be better if we get consistent play out of Tyler Van Dyke. And then number 1, you might have guessed at this point, I think it's Renfro. I think it's Jake Renfro, which makes the 4th offensive lineman I have in my top 12. I also have 2 defensive linemen. So 6 out of the 12 on this list, I have it in the trenches. I think Renfro is just immeasurably important. And people talk about the LSU game. It's not a 1-for-1. It's not like you took a Lego piece in Bortolini out and you put a Lego piece in Renfro in, and then that's what changed everything. It was also other people getting healthy, Mordecai having a little more time. It was also a really bad LSU defense. But it was also Renfro was back and the offensive line clicked and we had tight snaps and everything just looked cleaner. From a timing standpoint, from a physical standpoint, Renfro is incredibly important to this line. And there's not who's your backup center, right? Again, it's probably Huber because we already talked about his versatility, but you see the cascade that leads to, right? If you lose a Renfro, then it's Huber moving over, then somebody else has to move into a new spot, and then you just can't lose a Renfro. And I think he's poised for like a potential, if he can stay healthy. I don't think I'm overblowing it based on who I've talked to, what I've heard, I think he's poised for an all-conference type of year, like second, third team, honorable mention, whatever it is. I think he's going to be that good if he can stay healthy, and it looks like he is. It looks like he's healthy. It looks like he's ready to go. I think he's irreplaceable in the line for what he gives you. And it's not just the physical skills. It's not just he can snap the ball. He has been part of a winning culture, much like Chaney and Wohler. He provides leadership on the line, irreplaceable. So that's my list. Those are my top 12 guys on the team this year that you cannot lose. Renfro, Van Dyke, Wohler, Rico, Curtis Neal, Hallman, Nelson, Huber, and then my bottom 12 was Pauling, Barten, Chaney, and Ashcraft. There's better players than some of these guys that aren't on my list. A guy like Pius, Thomas, Lowry. I just think outside linebacker is kind of stacked to some degree. There's Nizer Forkran. There's really good players that aren't on this list. Huey Walker, Ches Malusi, Bryson Green, Vinny Anthony. I just think some of the other spots are more depth limited. I want to get into this really quick to wrap up the show. A couple people, JM saying, I'm thinking 6-6, maybe 7-5. I don't believe this air raid nonsense. Nathan R. Phil Longo catching heat that isn't warranted. So there is, and this is the part I want to talk about, is Nathan's comment here. I think there is a little bit, certainly the patience is not going to be there if this is another offensive struggle year for Phil Longo. I'm seeing fans saying the air raid's not going to work. Phil Longo is not going to work. Guys, you got to, just my opinion, again, we never tell anybody how to fan, but you got to give it more than a year. You got to give it more than a year, in my opinion, because it has worked. Like the idea that the air raid's nonsense, it just, in my opinion, or that he can't do it. We've seen him do it multiple places, multiple times for multiple years, right? Like it can work. Now he has to prove it in Madison, but I think some of these, and this is what Nathan's saying, catching heat that isn't warranted. He took a major step back from a player personnel standpoint, inheriting Tanner Mordecai and Tyler Van Dyke through the transfer portal. The one spot I'll push back there, like ultimate at this point, he's not inheriting these quarterbacks. These are his guys, right? He brought in Mordecai. He brought in Van Dyke. He got brought in Locke. He's recruiting Landon Locke. He recruited, I mean, even a guy like Cole LaCrew, he had the final say on that, brought him in. Mabry's his guy. There's no more, I don't want to hear any more, like it's not his fault he inherited these guys. This is his quarterback room now. Now it's time to start putting up or shutting up. But I think it's way too early to say it's not going to work. I think it's way too early to say Longo can't do it because we've seen him do it. We've seen him build explosive offenses with quarterbacks that he recruited and developed. We also hear quarterbacks talk about how much they want to play for him. So I think it's too early. I understand the sentiment from guys like JM. And JM, I just put James up here. He's not the only one that said this. I'm not believing in the air raid nonsense or thinking Longo is the problem. I don't think he is. I like Longo. I like the idea to modernize Wisconsin's offense. I think you got to give it another year. If it doesn't click this year, yeah, then we got issues. Anyway, on Wisconsin, appreciate y'all so much. It is game week. Let's go. I can't wait. Yes, on Wisconsin. We will talk later. When you're done, go check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin got you covered with all things college football, all things transfer portal, NIL, whatever it is. Locked On College Football 24/7 stream on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.